What's up guys, this is Ultimate Device Vids, and with the release of iOS 14.7.1, as usual we're going to be doing a massive battery drain test in this video, comparing the results of iOS 14.7.1 to iOS 14.6. And I'm comparing 14.7.1 to 14.6 rather than 14.7 because 14.7 was just released so recently. I think there's more people who are curious to see how the latest firmware 14.7.1 compares to 14.6. And as always, we're using the base model phones from each generation, as including the Pro, Plus, and SE models would just be a little too chaotic. The very same iPhones were used for both tests. I first did this test on 14.6, and then these phones were updated to 14.7.1, and then I performed the exact same test again. The 14.7.1 test is on the bottom, and the 14.6 test is on the top. True Tone and Night Shift are disabled for both tests on all devices, in addition to auto brightness. And here's the battery health capacities, and they're all pretty high, but they're not all at 100%. But once again, the point of this video is not really to compare the phones to one another, but how these phones do on these two iOS versions in comparison to one another. And once again, it's the same iPhones being used in both tests. The brightness is set to the same amount on all devices in both tests using a lux meter, and the volume is turned down on all of them. And alright, so we're going to go ahead and kick things off by turning off the power source for both tests, getting rid of the cables, and we're going to kick things off with our usual 1 hour of YouTube video streaming. And of course, we're going to make sure all the videos are full screen 1080p quality. And again, we're just going to let it stream for an hour. And checking in after an hour of YouTube video streaming, as you can see, basically same performance on both. If there's ever a difference, it's just literally by 1% point here or there. So next, we're going to head on over to Instagram for 1 hour of looking at posts and looking at stories for a little bit as well. And all right, checking in after a full hour of Instagram, same thing to report here. As you can see, looking very similar between these two iOS versions. So once again, it's looking good for the latest iOS version, stacking up pretty well against 14.6. And next, we're going to head on over to Minecraft for 1 hour of playing the game. And as usual, since I only have so many fingers, for the first half of this hour, so for the first 30 minutes, I'm going to interact with the 3 newest devices and leave the 3 oldest devices idle with the game running. And for the second 30 minutes, I'm going to interact with the 3 oldest devices and leave the 3 newest devices idle with the game open. So all the devices get the same amount of interaction in the app versus standby time. And checking in after an hour, as usual, Minecraft takes a pretty significant hit on the battery across the board. But as you can see, comparing these two iOS versions to each other, once again, pretty negligible differences and pretty similar performance between 14.6 and 14.7.1. A few minor differences, but nothing huge. So next, we're going to head on over to Safari for 1 hour of web browsing. So we're going to be loading new web pages and scrolling through web pages for an hour. And for the first 30 minutes, we're going to do that on apple.com. And for the second 30 minutes, we're going to do that on theverge.com. And as I often say in this type of video, even though I do my best to ensure that there's the minimum possible amount of differing variables between these two iOS version tests, there's always going to be minor differences that might throw it off a little bit. So rather than interpreting these videos as super detailed percent point by percent point analysis, you should just interpret these tests as gauging overall battery performance. Anyways, after the full hour of web browsing, as you can see, very similar battery results once again between these two iOS versions, with the iPhone 6s and iPhone 7 for both tests just barely hanging on at 1%. So next, we're going to head on over to Subway Surfers for 30 minutes of playing the game. And while starting up Subway Surfers, the iPhone 7 on iOS 14.6 is the first device to die at 4 hours and 2 minutes in. And just 1 minute later, the iPhone 7 on 14.7.1 also dies at 4 hours and 3 minutes. And just a few seconds later, the 6S on 14.7.1 also dies at 4 hours and 3 minutes in. And just like we did with Minecraft, for the first half of this 30 minutes, so 15 minutes, we're going to interact with the 3 newest devices, leaving the 3 oldest devices with the app open in standby mode. And for the second 15 minutes, we're going to interact with the 3 oldest devices and leave the 3 newest devices with the game open in standby. And a little while later here, at 4 hours and 14 minutes in, the 6S on iOS 14.6 dies as well. And checking in after a full 30 minutes, as you can see here with the 6S and 7 dead in both tests, the other devices are remaining very similar in terms of percentage, with just again a few minor differences as we've been seeing throughout the test. So next, we're going to play 10 minutes of Temple Run with ads appearing in between rounds of the game. And I'm sure you guys know it by now. For the first half of this 10 minutes, so 5 minutes, I'll interact with the 3 newest devices, leaving the 3 oldest devices in standby, and vice versa for the last 5 minutes. This leaves both iOS versions with, once again, very similar results. So far, I'm definitely not seeing too much of a difference in this test in regards to battery life between these two versions. So next, we're going to play an hour of PUBG. So we'll open up the application on all devices here and start playing. And once again, here we'll interact with the 3 newest for the first 30 minutes and the 3 oldest for the last 30 minutes. And 5 hours into the test, the iPhone 8 on 14.7.1 dies. And just a few seconds later, the iPhone 8 on 14.6 also dies. And even though none of the 3 older devices are still alive, I designed this test in the case that they were. So 30 minutes in, we'll stop interacting with the 3 newest devices. And 5 hours and 30 minutes in, the iPhone 11 on 14.7.1 is the next device to die. And 2 minutes later, the 11 on 14.6 also dies. And 1 minute later, at 5 hours and 33 minutes in, the 10R on 14.6 dies as well. And a little later, at 5 hours and 39 minutes in, the 10R on 14.7.1 dies as well. And alright, so checking in after a full hour of PUBG, with the iPhone 12 being the only device remaining. As you can see, very similar results here, just 1% apart. And with the first round of the test complete, we're going to head back to YouTube for a second hour of streaming that same video, once again full screen at 1080p quality. Checking in after the second hour of YouTube video streaming, you can see they're both at 21% on the iPhone 12. So we'll head on over to Instagram for our second round of looking at posts and a little bit of looking at stories as well. And checking in after that, as you can see, once again, same percentage here, both at 14%. So we're going to head on over to Minecraft for the second scheduled hour. And 8 hours and 14 minutes into the test, the iPhone 12 on 14.6 dies. And just 4 minutes later, at 8 hours and 18 minutes into this test, the iPhone 12 on 14.7.1 finally dies. So there you guys have it for the battery drain test. As you can see, very negligible differences between these 2 tests on all the devices. And of course, as I always say, battery life entirely depends on what you do on your device and how you use your device, but in this test at least, it seems that there's very little difference between these 2 iOS versions in terms of battery performance. And let's move on to the final test we're going to be doing, which is a 12-hour standby test. So this tests how well these devices on these 2 iOS versions are able to hold charge when being asleep for several hours at a time. And as I just said, once again, keep in mind that, of course, a standby test as well entirely depends on a variety of factors, such as notifications you're getting on your device, background processes you might have running, cell signal strength, etc. In this example, this is a very controlled test with no SIM cards in any of these phones. They're all connected to the same Wi-Fi network, and as you can see here, they all have the same notification settings set. So with all devices charged up to 100%, we're going to disconnect the power source that these devices are connected to in both tests, and we'll get rid of the cables, and we'll just put all the devices to sleep here, and we'll set a stopwatch and just let it run for 12 hours. And checking in 12 hours later, as you can see here, they all did very well. All devices in both tests not losing very much percentage. As you can see, some devices not losing any percentage as well. But alright guys, that just about wraps it up for this video. As always, let me know down below in the comment section which iOS version you're using and how the battery performance has been for you. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.